main radical right parties and organizations in Denmark, we have to distinguish in between the parliamentary, so radical and populist right, and so the far right extra-parliamentary groups that are less willing to accept democratic forms and democratic institutions. As for the first group, the most influential party is the Danish People's Party, Dansk Folkeparti. This is a party that has now reached fairly has a fairly long historical tradition. It was formed back in 1995 as an offspring of the Progress Party, which was a protest, so ultra-liberal, but also anti-immigrant and anti-Islam party. It is an interesting party, not only because of the electoral support that it has received through the past decades, but also as concerns the more recent developments in terms of political influence of this party, but also in terms of the electoral decline that this party has experienced at the last June 2019 parliamentary elections. So, what is it that characterizes the Danish People's Party as a populist right-wing party? Well, as similar other parties in other places in Europe, and particularly Western Europe, the party has an issue, or has had an issue ownership in terms of anti-immigration politics and anti-asylum politics, and in particular, it is a party that also has profiled itself by being Eurosceptical. So Euroscepticism and anti-immigration are the two, let's say, major political stances that made this party interesting to the Danish electorate. Besides being on the more like redistribution dimension, a party that has come away from the ultraliberalism and tax protest aspects of the Progress Party, and has become more prone to accept forms of welfarism, although a welfare that is thought for the ethnic and national Danes, so what is defined as welfare chauvinism. With this combination, the party achieved influence back in 2001, after some years where it had been treated more like a pariah or a marginal party. This namely did not succeed in Danish politics as it has succeeded in other countries in Europe, because in 2001 the center-right political parties accepted the support of the Danish People's Party in order to create a minority coalition that lived on for more than a decade, all considered. So, I mean, the party was able, from a rather privileged position of a government supporter, but not of government participant, to influence the politics in terms of migration, and in terms of integration. What is interesting is in the last developments, because I mean it can be argued that forms of right-wing populism that have characterized the Danish People's Party have entered into the mainstream, and this not only as regards the right wing, namely the liberals, for example, and the conservatives, but also the social democrats in the country. This can partly explain the 2019 electoral decline, electoral fall, one would argue, of this party. In fact, the Danish People's Party lost more than 12% of the electoral support. Falling from 21% of the percent of the support in 2015 to about 8.7% of support in 2019. Moreover, another party has emerged on the right side of the political spectrum, the New Bourgeois, New Borgerlige, that actually achieved so representation in parliament with 2.4% of the votes, and with 4 seats in parliament. And it is rather interesting because, I mean, this party somehow challenges the Danish People's Party as concerns the migration and asylum politics, going in for a complete stop to both migration and asylum. So let's say that at the moment there's a kind of a gridlock for this party, because, I mean, it is so challenged from the one side from the Social Democrats that have somehow taken in some of the positions as regards to migration and integration, and from the other side from a more extreme party, the New Bourgeois, that somehow is taking in voters that have been disaffected by the fact that the Danish People's Party didn't achieve more influence, for example, by taking government responsibility back in 2015. The extra-parliamentary far right, it is also rather interesting developments we are witnessing to that. One of these is perhaps the great echo or the media echo that a party called the Stram Kurs, strict course, got before the elections. This party run actually the electoral campaign did not achieve parliamentary representation, so it did not come over the 2% threshold. But nevertheless, it put some issues on the agenda in rather extremist ways, and particularly this movement or this organization is characterized by being Islamophobic and anti-immigrant. So, for example, one of the rallies that generally defines this party is a political speech in areas with higher ethnic minority representations was the main the front figure of this party burns the Quran. Other groups are the Nordic resistance movement, which lately also made it to the headlines because of the vandalism that has been done in several of the Jewish graveyards around the peninsula of the Jutland. The influence of mainstream politics by the radical and populist right is an extremely relevant question in relation to the Danish case. I have earlier mentioned the fact that the Danish People's Party, which is the biggest radical right populist parties in the countries to date, still. This party has for decades influenced the politics of the right, the center right coalition by the liberals and conservatives together with other minor parties in more recent times. There's a lot of speculations to what extent actually the privileged position that has put this party in the more, let's say, convenient positioning of not being directly involved into government decision, but being a support partner. Well, as for the transnational connections of the radical and populist right in Denmark with others, similar party or organizations in the Nordic context, it might be remarked that I mean, the Danish People's Party has very often made use of what the Norwegian scholar Elisabeth Iversflaten has called the reputational shield. That means that we talked about this at the beginning, saying that the Danish People's Party is an offspring of the Progress Party, the protest, the tax protest, and the anti-immigrant party of the 1970s, 1980s, and to some extent, this has shielded them off from accusations of having an uncomfortable past with roots in National Socialism or in a far-right movement. The parties around in Europe that might have been might to some extent have affected their reputation by putting upon them the stamp of being too radical. For example, when it comes with associations with the Front National or the Freiheitliche Österreich in earlier times. Now, as for the Nordic political parties, of course, there's a kind of similarity with the Progress Party in Norway. One of the closest connections is with a party that might have been rather uncomfortable when it comes to the defined reputational shield, which is the Sverigedemokraterna, the Swedish Democrats. I mean, in the Danish People's Party paper, there are several articles back in times when the Sweden Democrats were still affected by the cordon sanitaire, still considered a pariah, which it might be argued the party still is in the Swedish context, whereas the Danish People's Party in Denmark argued that this was a problem of Sweden and a problem of of a certain political correctness that had been already dealt with in Denmark due to the Danish People's Party.